The important thing to recognize about translation, and machine translation in particular, is that the technology is about access to content that may be in a language that you don't speak. How do we provide that kind of access? How do we make the content that's in a particular language available to people who don't speak that language? People who are recent immigrants to the country, let's say, who don't speak the language, how are they going to have access? The miraculous thing about machine translation is when we provide content in a language where someone doesn't have access, where someone is blocked from access, it is a life-changing thing. Oftentimes it's something that completely changes the way that person interacts with the world. How do you make that content accessible to them for whatever context? It could be maybe it's in a scenario where they're going to a hospital and they need to read the instructions about how to take a particular drug. Or maybe it's going to the city to find out how they're supposed to basically turn on their water and sewer and their phones. I mean, this kind of material, this kind of content, when someone doesn't speak the language, how are you going to relay that information to them? It's true that one can hire a translator to help, to provide translation for that individual. And I think there are plenty of scenarios where a translator is the right way to go. But there are a lot of other scenarios where it's just not possible. I mean, a person cannot have a translator that follows him wherever he or she goes. They will have to rely on automated kinds of services to help them access content. And I think that's where machine translation comes in, where there are scenarios where it's impossible or impractical or overly expensive to hire a translator. And in those kinds of scenarios, machine translation fits the bill. And there are a lot of scenarios like that. It's not just, in-person kinds of settings. It's also just access to, let's say, content on the web. You're not going to hire a translator to translate all of the content that you want to access on the web. No, you're going to use some sort of machine translation to translate that content for you. And so there are many, many scenarios where machine translation is the right choice because it would not be possible to hire a translator in those scenarios. So machine translation is a way to make content, whatever that content is, available to more speakers of different languages. That's, I would say, the purpose of machine translation. However it's cast, however it's used, its purpose is to make content accessible. So if you have someone who speaks Hmong, for instance, or speaks another language, let's say Russian or Ukrainian or some other language or Chinese, it doesn't matter, where they don't speak the language that's spoken in the country, they're blocked from access. They're blocked from communicating with other people. And if you're able to provide tools and resources for them to be able to communicate with other people, to read content, to hear content, to speak in their language with someone who doesn't speak their language, that's a life-changing thing. That's something that changes the way that person interacts with the world. Language itself, if you think about it, language is something that's uniquely human. It's unique to us as a species. And it's something that we identify culturally too. It's something that's important to our cultural makeup. It's something that's important to the way we see the world. And so our focus for as long as Microsoft Translator has existed is to build as many translation engines as we can to support as many of the people on the planet as we can, to make content accessible to everybody that we possibly can.